All right, we are back from a brief recess after visiting with our equity ambassadors, and the next item on the agenda is review of the proposed revisions to the 2023-2024 Code of Student Conduct. Dr. Cashwell, would you tee up Dr. Noel, please?
I certainly will. As you know, each year we bring forward proposed revisions. Dr. Noel is here to provide an overview of those proposed revisions, but would note that we won't be seeking the board's approval on any changes to the Code of Conduct until our June 22 meeting. So this is a first look at proposed revisions to the student code. Dr. Noel.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Cashwell, this afternoon I will be sharing with you the first read of the proposed changes to the 2023-2024 Code of Student Conduct. This year's proposed changes are related to the following topics: bus stops, technology and the internet, SBAR codes, transportation, bullying, harassment, alternative placement of students, and then question and answer. Every year we listen to the voices of our students, staff, and parents as we prepare to make changes to the code. The first proposed change was related to bus stops. As you recall, in the 2022-2023 school year, we removed door-to-door language from the Code of Student Conduct as we do not have door-to-door jurisdiction. Because of that, I propose removing all language relating to going to and coming from bus stops. For example, in the preface of the code, it states, "This Code of Student Conduct applies to all Henrico County Public School students. It is enforced when they are on school property, traveling to school or from school, traveling to, at, and from bus stops." Because we do not have door-to-door jurisdiction and cannot control what a driver does, I propose that traveling to and from school be removed. I also propose that traveling to, at, and from bus stops is edited to simply read at school bus stops. On April 13th, I met with the Superintendent's Student Advisory Committee to discuss this issue, and they were overwhelmingly in agreement with this proposal. The last proposed change for bus stops is in-school vehicles. To expand the scope, I propose adding school division-owned or contracted vehicles to this bullet. The next proposed change to the 2023-2024 Code of Student Conduct is related to technology and the internet. There was a collaborative effort between technology and TLI that led to several proposed edits to the Student Technology Acceptable Use Policy for the code. For time's sake, proposed changes to the technology and internet section can be reviewed in the red line version of the complete 2023-2024 Code of Student Conduct. Next, we have SBAR codes. The first code to be addressed is BS04, failure to be in one's assigned place. This code was retired by the VDOE and is no longer valid. Therefore, I propose that this code be removed. The Department of Education has added a few new codes and additional language to existing codes. New for 2023-24 is BS015. Student is not going to class as assigned. In BS016, student is in an unauthorized area of campus. For existing code BESO13, threatening, intimidating, or instigating violence, injury, or harm to another student or students, the VDOE added not including written statements. The reason that language was added is because the new SBAR code BESO14, which specifies that the threat or intimidation is in writing. Another new code is BESO18. This code refers to the reassignment of students due to certain criminal charges in the community. Our schools do a great job of informing the DRHO when they get this information. Now the VDOE is keeping track of that data. And the last SBAR update is to PD15, illegal possession of other firearms. The VDOE added the following language to this code. With the proper attention given to disruptive bus behavior, I propose adding a new section under transportation called School Bus Violations and Leveled Consequences to the 23-24 Code of Student Conduct. This section specifically addresses inappropriate bus behavior. Please note that the following school bus violations and consequences include, but are not limited to, Level 1 and 2 violations. As you can see, these violations are not very severe. The corresponding level 1 or 2 consequences for a first offense may be a verbal and/or written reprimand from the school principal or designee. For a second offense, it may result in a parent conference. A third level 1 or 2 violation may result in a 3-day suspension from the school bus. And lastly, repeated offenses may result in a 5 to 10-day suspension from the school bus and an assigned seat. Level 3 violations include the following offenses. Because these consequences are more severe, because these violations are more severe, the consequences for level 3 violations are more severe as well. A first offense may result in a verbal and/or written reprimand from the school principal or designee. A second offense may result in a 3 to 10-day suspension from school bus and an assigned seat. A third offense may result in a 10-day suspension from the school bus and an assigned seat for the rest of the year. And repeated offenses may result in a suspension from the school bus for the remainder of the year. The most severe violations can be found in level 4. Because of the severity, some of these violations may not only result in a bus suspension, but also may possible suspension from school. Level 4 consequences may result in a 1 to 10-day suspension from school bus and an assigned seat for a first offense. A second offense may result in a 10-day suspension from the school bus and an assigned seat for the remainder of the school year. And repeated offenses may result in a suspension from the school bus for the remainder of the school year and a possible ban from riding the school bus. Level 4 bus violations may also be referred to the DRHO for additional consequences. On July 1st, 2023, there will be a statutory change regarding allegations of bullying. Our code currently reads, the principal or his/her designee is directed to notify parent of any student involved in an alleged incident of bullying and of the status of any investigation within 5 school days of the allegation of bullying. The General Assembly has removed the 5 days from this section and replaced it with 24 hours of learning of the allegations of bullying. For more transparency, we propose adding the principal and his or her designee shall keep the parents updated regarding the status of any investigation. Time-wise, we know this is a significant change for our schools and will be emphasized with our school administrations in our July professional development. The final proposed change is related to alternative placements. The code currently states students who have been long-term suspended by the DRHO or expelled by the school board are not without educational opportunities during this period. I propose removing "are not without" from the 23-24 code because there are instances where a student may not receive HCPS educational services. Because of that, I propose that "may be assigned" replaces "are not without." In the same section, I propose adding the Center for Diversified Studies, CDS, for online learning as an option for long-term suspended students, as well as for expelled students. I have provided a red line version of the complete 2023-2024 Code of Student Conduct for you to review. And as a reminder, we currently have the Code of Student Conduct available online in Spanish and in English. For the 2023-24 school year, we will have the code translated into the 5 most common languages. Other languages will be made available upon request. And lastly, hard copies of the Code of Student Conduct will be provided to all of our comprehensive and alternative schools. Thank you, and now we'll answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Noel, and really, we appreciate your patience with changing the agenda this afternoon to be responsive to our students. Let's see, who can we start with? Reverend Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Well, for this. Can we go to slides 15 and 16 as it relates to transportation? So looking at an example on slide 15, it states that failing to remain seated could be classified as level 1 or 2 violation. And then on slide 16, it states moving from seat to seat while the bus is in motion is categorized as a level 3 violation, and disrupting, distracting, and or disobeying the driver could be classified as level 3 violation. Because there seems to be a fine line between interpretation and classification, can you share with us how our bus drivers and attendants, transportation team will be empowered, supported, and trained to interpret the changes of the Code of Conduct, and how will we work to ensure that the violations and leveled consequences will be equitably applied to our students?
Certainly. The difference between the standing, if a student is simply standing up while the bus is in motion, but they haven't moved from their seat. That's the difference. If a student is in their seat and then moved to another seat, whether it's directly across from them, in front or behind, that's when it goes from the level 1 or 2 to a level 3. As far as how we would normalize this with our administrators with this new section, we have our large professional development in July, the Positive School Climate Outreach Day, and we will formally stress that because this will be new for all of our schools. And it would be certainly normalized. There will be scenarios played out on that day so that our building administrators can become familiar with it. I'll work with Mr. Ellis so that he also, this came from him, that he will also be able to share this information with his drivers.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Can we go to slide 22? So on slide 22, bullying, harassment, the suggested change is to notify the parent of any student involved in an alleged incident of bullying and of the status of investigation within 24 hours. We know we're opposed to the 25 days. So I appreciate the proposed change because it highlights the sense of urgency to address and attempt to resolve any perceived act of bullying.
Right.
Could we also, is there a possibility, I don't know, Dr. Castro, that we clarify that the parent or guardian is to be notified either in writing or verbally through a phone call, and also state that the notification will be documented by the principal or his or her designee to ensure that there is consistency in regards to across the board? Or how, just can you kind of clarify that for me?
Sure. Similar to other discipline letters, there would be a phone call home updating the parents on where we are with the alleged bullying, then followed up with a letter. It would be difficult, very challenging to have a letter sent within 24 hours, but certainly a phone call should be able to be made.
We can take a look, I think, between now and the June 22nd review of any proposed changes. And if not language here, we do provide our administrators guidelines related to best practices for administration of the code, and we can work through that there as well.
Yes.
That's important. So I appreciate that. So you just kind of inform me of our process. So the process is the call first, then the follow-up letter.
Yes.
So also, can we make sure that we're updating the policies? We're mindful that we use the term legal guardian each time we use parent.
Sure.
So under the alternative placement section, for our students who have been long-term suspended by DRHO or expelled by us, the school board, language is changing to that may be aside. Can we have anything more definitive understanding of what the criteria or what the threshold would be used to decide that a student would not receive alternative placement? What was it? Is it because of funding, no available placement?
No, it would be dependent upon what the student has done, what code of student conduct violation the student has done. For example, if a student brings a firearm to school, there's a great chance that student may not receive HCPS educational services. Other code violations, the student would more than likely receive some sort of violation, but there are instances where a student may not receive any services.
I appreciate that. That's distinguished based upon the severity of the violation.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Nothing else.
Yes, sir. Nothing else.
Madam Chair, I'm done. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Reverend Cooper. Mrs. Shea.
Thank you, Ms. Kinsella. I just, couple comments and one question. So this, similar to the policy that Reverend Cooper was talking about the bullying within 24 hours, I just want to support the addition of keeping the parent or guardian updated regarding the status of any investigation. I think that is some of the feedback I get back most from parents is just a frustration when they don't know what's going on. And I know it's a fine line because both students have rights, right? And there's some privacy there. But just in general, keeping parents just want to be in the loop on what's going on with their kid.
Yeah.
And so I certainly support particularly that addition there. Also, I want to thank you for the translated materials. I was actually speaking with one of our equity ambassadors before our meeting started, and she shared that English is her second language from when she moved here in elementary school. And the recent addition of all of the translated materials have allowed her parents to feel like they're more involved in school now, and they're more kind of up to date on what's going on with her and what's going on in the school division, and that's been a game changer for their family. So thank you for everyone's effort around that, but continuing that with this. And then looking at the transportation, the new transportation guidelines for elementary, failing to utilize seatbelts on the bus will be a new addition. I know not all of our buses have seatbelts, so obviously this would pertain to the ones that do have seatbelts. Thinking about that though, there's obviously going to be some training with our elementary school students of utilizing those seatbelts. Is there some, I assume there is, but I don't know if we need to put verbiage in or not, of flexibility when there's a sub-driver. Because if an elementary school student typically does not have a bus with seatbelts, they're not trained in how to use those when they have a sub-driver. And so I just don't want that to be an extra point of frustration, whether it be in the code of conduct or generally just what's expected with our students with a sub-driver. That could cause, as Thomas the Tank Engine would say, that could cause confusion and delay, which is not what we're going for. So just keeping that in mind as we implement this new expectation that students would wear their seatbelt.
Absolutely, and I'll reach out to Mr. Ellis again about that too.
Great, thank you. That's all.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Shea. Ms. Zogburn.
Thank you. Not a whole lot for other than what my colleagues have already said. I like this new transportation section. We need to support our bus drivers and give them more alternatives and options for solving behavior problems. So I'm really appreciative of that effort that went into this, and I'm sure they will be as well. Are we gonna, I'm just curious, get any feedback from our bus drivers on these consequences, and curious if we're doing
These
any kind of-
actually came from our transportation department, Mr. Ellis, who's been receiving feedback from his drivers along with Mr. Pritchard all year through focus groups.
Okay,
So this is
I was gonna
reflective
say
of that
focus
feedback.
groups, yeah. Okay, that's great. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cashwell.
Thank you so much, Ms. Zogburn. Ms. Atkins.
Thank you for the presentation. My comments are also regarding transportation violations and consequences, and I want to ask you to help me think through just this one part. So once a third offense happens, a student may be suspended till your level 1 and 2. Please share, possible consequences if a student is coming back from a third offense. What happens then? So in other words, you have a repeat offender. And at what point is that student held accountable? So you had your first chance, your second chance, now you're at your third chance and you got suspended. You come right back to school and are distracted on the bus.
Right.
In your level 1 or 2, it seems like there's so many more options. And I want you to help me understand the differences in maybe unique situations or what that may look like for that student who's already had the third offense, comes back. What does discipline look like again if they're disruptive on the bus?
Great question. This is more cumulative. So if a student violated, let's say a level 1 or 2, and they got a repeated status, and then all of a sudden they violated a level 3 offense, we wouldn't start at the first offense, as in we wouldn't start with a letter of reprimand or verbal reprimand. It would go to probably a second offense, 3 to 10 days out of school. For example, if a student had about 2 or 3 level 3 offenses, and then all of a sudden they went to a level 4 offense, we wouldn't start at the least of the level 4 offense consequences. It would be more than likely one of the second ones, or even let me get to it, or possibly a 10-day suspension from the bus under the assigned seat, or depending on what occurred, it could be a repeated offense and the student loses bus privileges for the remainder of that year and possibly banned, depending on it. So it wouldn't start over each time. Like I said, if a student did a level 1 or 2, and then they did a level 3, we wouldn't start at the least severe, I don't want to use the word severe, but the least severe consequence for that student. It would come up depending on what was done.
Thank you for that explanation, because in reading it, there may be an opportunity to be a bit more detailed to understand after that third offense, it does not mean you get to start all over with bringing the student to speak to the principal and then being contacted and the student's parents are contacted. I personally, just speaking on behalf of myself, think that we should be much firmer. I think once a student commits or is in violation of our code of conduct, after being suspended, comes back, gets back on the bus, and still violates the code of conduct again, they could cycle through 5, 6, 7 times before truly, in my opinion, understanding consequences. So I'd love to see more detail around how many times you can be disruptive on the bus before you are no longer able to ride the bus, because public transportation is a privilege.
Right.
I don't know of a law, and please keep me accurate if there is one, but to be able to continuously be disruptive on a bus, sometimes standing and switching seats is disruptive. You have a whole busload of children. And so I'd love to learn more about that. The other part is around professional development. I know our presentation is on code of conduct, so feel free to respond by not giving a response and coming back at a later moment. But I am very, very curious about professional development and specifically how to implement violations to the code of conduct for students with mental or physical differences. I think in this space and understanding the need to stand or physical limitations, what does that look like with discipline? And not you sharing with me, but in training, what does that look like in professional development, and how is that handled?
Let me make sure I understand. So how would a student with a disability be handled via the discipline process?
Yes.
Okay,
Because there are some students that may not be able to control movement, so forth and so on. And the bus driver may have no idea that a student has some physical or mental differences. So in professional development, and maybe this is being done already, I would like to learn how our staff are trained.
Right.
I would note, and we can follow up with more specificity on it, Dr. Noel and I will, when students have an IEP or a 504 plan that require them to receive some sort of an accommodation, either in the classroom or on the bus, we are required to and do annually train all staff who interact with that student. And we can describe that process and then sort of what that looks like, I think, to go more in depth to your question related to then how the code of conduct applies.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this. I am so excited that we're going to have some more concrete. We've had rules in place and practices in place, but I do think that this is certainly a step in the right direction in bringing clarity and understanding to families as well as students. So thank you so much.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Atkins. Dr. Noel, and on regard to the technology changes, can you just highlight one more time because all those changes are actually in the student code of conduct redline version. Can you just highlight one more time what those are in regard to, or Dr. Cashwell, please?
I can give a brief overview, and a lot of language changes there related to safety, security, and privacy with devices, acceptable use policies, things about handling your device, the placement of stickers, or disassembling your device in any way. So tightens language there.
Thank you so much for just highlighting that on the record for me. And then, Dr. Noel, this may not even be you either, in terms of just, as I look at the student code of conduct, and I realize as a mom of 3 that go to Henrico schools, and as a board member, it's a 63-page document now. And I know that we encourage, we actually require students and families and guardians to go through with their student and sign it before they come to school. But I don't really know that that's happening. And there are so many, maybe not to the degree that everyone understands, and given the number of changes that are happening, is there a way perhaps that we could go over just highlight certain pieces of student code of conduct for families, or how will this be shared between now and June 22nd when the board votes on these changes?
So certainly, once a new code is adopted each year, to your point, it is updated, and that this is one of our required forms at the beginning of each school year, both for students and for parents or guardians, legal guardians. It's one of our required signatory forms to begin the school year. But at each school, we also host, the administrators host student code of conduct assemblies with students to make sure that they're reviewing again, rather than just a page-by-page reading, any highlights. And we do provide guidance to our administrative teams. Dr. Noel and his team do an in-depth training with the administrators each summer that lifts up big changes, certainly these pieces around transportation. And we've even provided at times some turnkey material, presentations, PowerPoint, so they can review them with students. But to your point, that is, a key piece of this is how do we make the changes known, or even our current practices beyond that, and then make sure that they're understandable, particularly to our students who are likely not reading a document cover to cover. So we do go over those. And then, as infractions may occur, making sure we use those as teachable moments with our students. So certainly we apply discipline as needed, but I think Dr. Noel and his team have worked more and more over time, and particularly with our partners in our PBIS team and VTSS, on how do we use these as teaching moments so students understand, how to change their behavior accordingly and not get a second offense.
And I just think too, the superintendent student advisory committee, last month's topic was the student code of conduct, and their feedback is so valuable. It would be nice for our students really to understand, also in response to climate survey data, there are consequences in place, for behavior. I just think it's important, because survey feedback overall last year, it'd be interesting to know what the climate surveys are going to bring in June this year as to how folks are feeling about behavior and safety and consequences. Dr. Noel, do you see, I know this is not a part of today's presentation necessarily, but cell phones. Do we have a feeling for how the cell phone piece of student code of conduct is going in our schools? Again, we're addressing, bullying and harassment, and mental health is constantly top of mind, and safety. Do we feel our cell phone policy, as stated in student code of conduct, is sufficient?
I think what we have now is definitely sufficient. No, I've not had any issues from schools that certainly would come to our level for a possible long-term suspension or a recommendation for expulsion. At the school level, possibly, but certainly nothing so serious. So I have not had any complaints from building administrators either about it.
Okay, thank you very much. And this next piece, I support all the transportation changes as well, as to safety and as to feedback from our drivers. And this may be a Dr. Cashwell question or a Mr. Pritchard question as to how will the seatbelt, buckled seatbelts on buses be monitored, if you will?
Yeah,
Is this another ask of our bus drivers?
Well, this feedback's actually come from our bus drivers, and when they have seat belts on the bus, they're asking that they be used and that there be an ability to enforce that. Our drivers currently encourage students on buses to wear their seatbelts, and especially with the younger kids, that discourages some of the getting up and down inadvertently. So I think this is meant to emphasize that when a driver asks, that they're following through with that, and that there can be a consequence if there's repeated disruption there or not following that.
And Mr. Ellis and I talked about this. It's pretty clear cut. If you're in your seat, you obviously must be wearing your seatbelt. If you're not wearing it.
Okay,
And then we
thank
make it
you.
that much simpler to go through. So
I know in the last August at a bus orientation, a transportation orientation, this was a topic. So I just wanted to hear how it evolved to now. So thank you. I'm excited about the safety, additional safety in terms of transportation. And that's all I had. Thank you so much, Dr. Noel.
you.
We do appreciate this, and we look forward to you coming back in June.
Absolutely. Thank you all.